My name is Terry Mayfield, and I was 29 years old when my parents finally said the quiet part out loud, right over the mashed potatoes, like it was as normal as passing the salt. Thanksgiving at my childhood home always smelled the same: roasted turkey, butter, sage, and that faint lemony cleaner my mother used like a warning label. The house looked warm from the outside, glow in the windows, wreath on the door, laughter drifting out. But I knew better. Warmth wasn't something that lived here, not for me. The dining room was already full when I arrived. Everyone was gathered around the table, talking over each other, plates clinking, the kind of chaos families put on display to prove they're happy. My older sister, Vanessa, sat like she owned the head of the table, confident, polished, perfectly loud. Beside her was her husband, Darren, scrolling through photos on his phone and showing them to anyone who leaned in. "Look at this," Darren said, turning his screen toward my father. "That's the backsplash we picked. Hand-cut tile." Vanessa laughed, tossing her hair. "It's going to be insane. We're doing the whole kitchen. New cabinets, island, lighting, everything." My mother, Joanne, smiled like Vanessa had just cured a disease. "You deserve it," she said. "You work so hard." 35,000, Vanessa announced proudly, like it was a medal. I sat down quietly, sliding into the chair that always seemed to be saved for me, technically included, emotionally irrelevant. My dad, Robert, nodded at Darren with that man-to-man admiration he saved for sons-in-law. He didn't ask how my drive was. He didn't ask how work was going. He didn't ask anything. I watched them, and something inside me tightened the same way it always did, like I was bracing for a hit I could already see coming. I told myself, don't do it. Don't bring up your life. Don't try to be seen. But I did anyway, because that was the curse of being the one who never mattered. You keep hoping today will be the day it changes. When the conversation paused long enough for me to slip in a sentence, I cleared my throat. "So, my apartment complex raised the security deposit," I said carefully. "They said it's for upgraded safety. I'm short this month, and I was wondering if you could help me cover part of it." The silence that followed wasn't dramatic. It was worse, casual, like my words were a small inconvenience they hadn't planned for. My mother didn't look at me right away. She dabbed her mouth with her napkin, slow and controlled, like she was choosing her tone. "Terry," she said, voice cool as the butter hardening on the table, "you need to understand something." My father nodded before she even finished her thought, as if the two of them had rehearsed this in private. "Vanessa's family will always come first," Joanne continued. "They have responsibilities. Children, a mortgage, a real household. You're independent." Independent. That word again. The word they used to dress up abandonment like it was a compliment. Robert added, "That's just how it is, sweetheart." My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. I felt the blood drain from my face so fast I got lightheaded, like my body was trying to protect me by shutting down. And then, beneath the shock, something colder settled in. Clarity. Because this wasn't new. Not really. This was just the first time they said it without pretending. Across from me, Vanessa continued cutting her turkey into neat squares, just like she did when we were kids. Darren kept scrolling, already moving on to countertops. My parents shifted to a debate about stuffing as if they hadn't just told me my place in the family, out loud, in front of everyone. Memory after memory flooded in, sharp enough to sting. When Vanessa turned 17, my parents surprised her with a metallic blue Honda Civic. I still remembered the way the driveway looked that day. Sunlight on the hood, balloons tied to the side mirror, my mother squealing like she'd won the lottery. I watched from my bedroom window as they pressed the keys into Vanessa's hand. All three of them hugged, laughing, taking pictures like it was a commercial. 8 months later, when I turned 17, I got a cake and a card that said, "Happy birthday, Terry." No car, no apology, not even an explanation. Just that unspoken agreement that Vanessa's milestones mattered more. College followed the same pattern, like the universe had stamped it into my file. Vanessa went to a private university, $50,000 a year, and my parents paid every cent without hesitation. Move-in day looked like a movie scene. A rented truck packed with dorm furniture, matching bedding, a mini fridge, a desktop computer, enough clothes to stock a boutique. That same summer, I worked 2 jobs, warehouse nights, grocery store weekends, saving every penny for community college. When I asked Dad if they could help with tuition, he sighed like I'd asked something unreasonable. "We already spent so much on Vanessa's schooling," he said. "You understand, right? She's the academic one. This is her shot." I understood. I always understood. That's what they trained me to do. 2 years later, I transferred to a state university on a partial scholarship I earned through pure stubbornness. My parents missed my community college graduation because Vanessa was hosting a baby shower that weekend. Pastel balloons mattered more than my cap and gown. Vanessa's wedding cost $60,000, 300 guests, open bar, a band, crystal chandeliers, centerpieces that cost more than my rent. I wore a rented dress and smiled for photos while my parents practically glowed with pride, like they'd personally built Vanessa's fairy tale. 2 years after that, I graduated from university with my degree. I walked across the stage and scanned the audience for familiar faces. Nothing. Later that night, I called to tell them about my first real job. My mother's voice was distracted. "That's nice, honey," she said, "but Vanessa's having contractions. We need to get to the hospital." They handed Vanessa $13,000 for a house down payment without blinking. When I asked to borrow $500 for textbooks one semester, my father frowned. "Money's tight," he said. Then he added the line that still burned whenever I thought about it. "You're young and single. You can figure it out. Vanessa has a family to think about." They drove across town in the evenings to babysit Vanessa's kids for free, so she and Darren could go on dates. No complaints, no boundaries. When I asked if they could keep an eye on my apartment while I went camping with friends for the weekend, my mother sighed, like I'd asked for her kidney. "We're not getting any younger, Terry. We can't be running all over creation." Back in the dining room, the conversation was still about Vanessa's kitchen, her dream backsplash, her custom cabinet pulls, her deserved upgrade. And then it hit me. This wasn't about money. It never was. It was about priority. Vanessa first, Terry last, always. I pushed my chair back quietly. "Excuse me," I said, my voice steady enough to fool them. I walked down the hallway lined with framed photos. Vanessa in kindergarten, Vanessa in high school, Vanessa in college, Vanessa in her wedding dress, Vanessa's newborns, Vanessa's family vacations. There were only a few pictures of me, small, tucked into corners, like afterthoughts. In the bathroom, I stared into my reflection in the same mirror I'd used as a kid. My face looked calm, but my eyes didn't. And in that silence, something inside me shifted. Not into rage, not into tears, but into something almost peaceful. If my family had spent 25 years putting me last, then I was done waiting for them to choose me. I would choose myself. And they had no idea what that decision was about to cost them. I didn't announce my decision to anyone. There was no dramatic speech, no slammed doors, no ultimatums shouted across a dining room table. I just stopped. Stopped over-explaining. Stopped volunteering my time. Stopped rearranging my life to fit emergencies that were never really emergencies, at least not when they belonged to me. Putting myself first didn't happen overnight. It happened quietly, the way most real changes do. For 18 months after that Thanksgiving, I rebuilt my life around one simple rule. If my family wasn't investing in me, I would. They still thought I was barely getting by. That assumption was convenient, for them and for me. What they didn't know was that my career had finally caught fire. I'd landed a job at a downtown tech startup not long after graduating. It wasn't glamorous at first. Long hours, steep learning curves, the constant hum of people trying to prove themselves. But I loved it. I was good at it. And for the first time in my life, effort actually translated into recognition. I got promoted once, then again. After leading a major database optimization project that saved a client hundreds of thousands of dollars, my salary jumped from $42,000 to $95,000 almost overnight. I didn't tell my parents, not because I was hiding, but because they never asked. I lived exactly the same way I always had. Same modest apartment, same 10-year-old sedan, same grocery list built around coupons and discipline learned the hard way. The difference was what happened to the money I didn't need to survive anymore. I opened 3 investment accounts at 3 different firms, index funds, growth stocks, a small, cautious dip into crypto, nothing flashy, nothing reckless, just consistency. At lunch breaks, I read financial planning books instead of scrolling my phone. At night, I watched investment tutorials instead of mindless TV. Every extra dollar went toward building something stable, something no one could take from me. Within a few years, my portfolio crossed $200,000. My family still thought I was struggling. And maybe the strangest part was how easy it was to let them keep believing that. The financial shift was significant, but the psychological shift was bigger. I stopped saying yes out of reflex. When Vanessa needed help moving furniture, I had plans. When my parents invited me to expensive group dinners where everyone split the bill evenly, I declined politely. When they suggested a family vacation that would cost me a week's wages, I booked my own trip instead. The first Christmas I didn't go home. I went skiing in Vermont with coworkers. Christmas Eve on a mountain felt better than sitting at a table where I didn't exist. On Mother's Day, instead of enduring another brunch centered around Vanessa's parenting challenges, I bought a ticket behind home plate at a baseball game and spent the afternoon cheering until my voice went hoarse. And then, unexpectedly, I started dating. I met Daniel Foster in a coffee shop near my office. He was waiting in line, debating aloud whether cold brew was worth the price. I laughed. He laughed back. That was it. Daniel was a project manager in healthcare. Steady, thoughtful, observant. He didn't rush intimacy, didn't perform interest. He just listened. On our third date, he asked about my work again. Not as small talk, but genuinely. He remembered details, asked follow-up questions days later, celebrated my wins like they mattered. It felt unfamiliar, almost suspicious. I realized how little that had happened in my life. One night, sitting on his apartment balcony with takeout containers between us, I finally explained why I never talked about family gatherings or holidays. As I told him about the favoritism, the skipped milestones, the way I'd learned to shrink myself to avoid rocking the family balance, Daniel didn't interrupt once. When I finished, he said quietly, "It sounds like they trained you to expect less." The words hit harder than any accusation. "And you learned that lesson so well," he continued, "that even now, when you're succeeding, you hide it." He wasn't wrong. I had spent so long making myself small that even my victories felt like something to apologize for. Daniel challenged that gently. He encouraged me to apply for leadership roles, to speak at industry meetups, to stop treating success like a secret. Around that time, I started therapy. Dr. Karen Lewis, a family therapist who specialized in adult children of dysfunctional families, listened as I laid out 25 years of patterns. She named it in the first few sessions. "Golden child and scapegoat," she said calmly. "Your family needed someone to represent success and someone to absorb discomfort. Your sister validated their identity as good parents. You absorbed the neglect, so the system stayed balanced." Hearing it framed that way was devastating and freeing. It was never about my worth. It was about the roles. With Dr. Lewis's help, I built boundaries that didn't require confrontation. I stopped responding to guilt-laced group texts. I used neutral language. "I'm not available that day. That doesn't work for my schedule. I won't be contributing to that." No explanations, no apologies. Money boundaries came next. No more group gifts I didn't choose. No more emergency loans that were never repaid. No more splitting restaurant checks when Vanessa ordered steak and wine and I ordered salad. People noticed. A coworker once told me, "You seem different lately, more grounded, like you figured something out." I had. I'd learned that loyalty doesn't mean self-erasure, that love doesn't require suffering, that success doesn't need to be hidden to keep others comfortable. The real test came on a quiet Wednesday night in March. My phone lit up with Vanessa's name. She never called unless she needed something. I almost let it go to voicemail. Almost. But curiosity won. "Terry," she said the moment I answered, her voice shaking. "I need to talk to you." She was crying, hard enough that I couldn't understand her at first. When the words finally came, they hit like a slow-motion collision. Mark's real estate business was under investigation. Mortgage fraud, fake documents, federal charges, foreclosure, repossession, legal fees, credit card debt stacked higher than I could imagine. Her world was collapsing, and as she sobbed into the phone, one thought settled calmly into place. This was the call my family had been training me for my entire life. The moment when I was expected to save them. I told her I needed 24 hours. When I hung up, I knew something fundamental had shifted. After 25 years of being last, they were about to need me first. And this time, I would decide what that meant. I didn't sleep that night, not because I was panicking, but because I was thinking too clearly for once. Vanessa's sobs replayed in my head, tangled with numbers, timelines, consequences, mortgage fraud, federal charges, foreclosure, repossession. The kind of words that don't just threaten comfort, they erase entire futures. By morning, the fog had lifted completely. This wasn't a temporary setback, this was collapse. Vanessa called again before noon. Her voice sounded hoarse, raw from crying. "I told Mom and Dad," she said. "They're not taking it well." I imagined it easily, my mother pacing, my father pulling out a yellow legal pad, both of them panicking, not because of the crime itself, but because the illusion they'd protected for decades was cracking. "They want us all to meet," Vanessa continued, "Sunday, at their place." Of course they did. Family meetings in our house were never discussions. They were announcements disguised as consensus. When I arrived that Sunday afternoon, the atmosphere felt heavy, like the air before a storm. Financial documents covered the coffee table. Credit card bills, foreclosure notices, legal letters stamped with words like urgent and final. Vanessa sat on the couch, eyes swollen, clutching a box of tissues. Mark sat beside her, hunched forward, staring at his hands like they belonged to someone else. My parents looked older than I remembered. Smaller. Fear had a way of shrinking people. My mother spoke first. "We need to talk about how you're going to help your sister through this," she said, not looking at me. "Not if, how?" My father cleared his throat and picked up the legal pad. "We've gone through the numbers," he said, tapping his pen. "To stop the foreclosure, cover the legal fees, and get the kids through the end of the school year, they need about $75,000. I waited. "Your mother and I can pull $27,000 from our retirement," he continued. "It's not ideal, but family comes first." Vanessa nodded tearfully. "Mark can sell some equipment and take a loan against his truck," my mother added. "That should get another $13,000. My father looked up at me then, really looked. "That leaves $30,000, he said, "which we're hoping you can handle." The way he said it, casual, confident, made my stomach tighten. They didn't ask if I could. They assumed I would. My mother leaned forward. "It would also make sense for you to move back home for a while," she said. "You could save on rent and help manage things while Mark gets back on his feet." Vanessa's eyes lit up with relief. "And maybe you could co-sign on a new lease if we need to move," she added quickly, "and help us find a financial advisor. You're good with that stuff." There it was. My life, quietly rebuilt, carefully balanced, being reallocated without my consent. "This isn't optional," my mother said sharply, as if sensing hesitation. "Family takes care of family. Period." My father's voice hardened. "If you don't step up now, if you abandon your sister when she needs you most, then you're not really part of this family." The manipulation was textbook. Guilt dressed up as loyalty, love turned into leverage. Vanessa leaned toward me, tears spilling again. "The kids keep asking why Aunt Terry hasn't been around. What am I supposed to tell them? That you don't love them enough to help?" Mark finally spoke, quiet but firm. "I know I messed up, but families forgive. That's what family is." Every word carried the same message. Your stability exists to save us. Your sacrifices are expected. Your boundaries are betrayal. They'd already told extended family I was handling the financial side of the crisis. They'd spent my money before asking for it. I felt the old reflex stir, the one that told me to comply, to smooth things over, to make myself useful. But something had changed. Therapy, Daniel's steady presence, years of discipline and self-reliance. I wasn't the same woman they'd trained. "I need 24 hours, I said calmly. "This is a major financial commitment. I need to review my accounts and think it through." Relief washed over their faces immediately. Vanessa grabbed my hand. "Thank you. I knew you wouldn't leave us." My father nodded approvingly. "That's the responsible approach." My mother was already planning. "Once this is settled, maybe we can still do Christmas together." As I drove home that night, the truth settled in with unsettling clarity. They hadn't seen me at all. Not my growth, not my boundaries, not my autonomy. They thought my request for time meant I was figuring out how to save them. They had no idea I was deciding whether. And for the first time in my adult life, I felt something close to power. Because calm Terry, the one they ignored for decades, was finally ready to say no. And they were about to learn that being last for 25 years had taught me exactly how to stand first. I didn't go back alone. That was the first mistake my family made. When Daniel asked why I was bringing a folder thick enough to qualify as a legal textbook, I told him the truth. "They're going to try to corner me," I said, "and I need someone in the room who actually knows me." He didn't hesitate. "Then I'm coming." Monday evening, we walked into my parents' living room together. The scene was almost identical to the night before, papers spread across the coffee table, my parents in their recliners, Vanessa and Mark on the couch, like anxious defendants waiting for sentencing. But the energy shifted the moment Daniel sat beside me. My mother noticed immediately. Her smile tightened. "We didn't know you were bringing company," she said. "This is Daniel," I replied evenly. "He's part of my life. I wanted him here." Vanessa forced a polite nod. Mark barely looked up. My father cleared his throat. "So," he said, tapping the legal pad, "did you have a chance to figure out how to access your savings?" There it was. "No, are you okay? No, what do you need? Just money." Before answering, I placed my folder on the table and opened it slowly. Before we talk about what I'm going to do, I said, you need to understand what I actually can do. I slid the first document toward my father. Checking account balance, 48,730 taels. His eyebrows shot up. Next, my savings account summary, 112,000. My mother leaned forward, her mouth parting slightly. Then the investment portfolio overview. Multiple accounts, index funds, growth stocks, 5 years of consistent contributions. Total value, 210,000. Vanessa gasped. That's not possible. I handed over my most recent tax return. Gross income, 95,000. Silence filled the room, thick and heavy. My father stared at the papers like they were written in a foreign language. Why? Why didn't you tell us you were doing so well? I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. You never asked, I said. And every time I tried to share something about my life, the conversation went back to Vanessa. Daniel spoke up calmly. I've been dating Terry for 8 months. I've watched her mention promotions and achievements that were dismissed or ignored, but you assumed she'd empty her accounts without question. My mother bristled. That's not fair. It is, Daniel replied gently. I've seen it. Vanessa crossed her arms. So you could have helped all along, she said, hurt sharpening into accusation. You just chose not to. No, I corrected. I chose to build a future. There's a difference. Mark finally looked up, frustration creeping in. If you have all this money, why wouldn't you help us? We're family. Because having resources doesn't mean surrendering them to fix problems I didn't create. I took a breath. And because this family has spent decades teaching me that my value is measured by how much I sacrifice for Vanessa. I slid another document forward, a projection of my stock options. If my company goes public as expected, these could be worth between $375,000 and $550,000 within 2 years. My mother's hands trembled slightly. You're saying you could save us, she whispered. I'm saying I could, I replied. Not that I will, not without conditions. The room stiffened. Vanessa's eyes lit with fragile hope. What conditions? I closed the folder and folded my hands. If you want my help, I said, we're restructuring this entire family dynamic. My mother's face hardened. You can't hold your family hostage. I'm not, I said calmly. I'm offering support with boundaries. You're free to decline. I opened the folder again and pulled out the final document, a detailed typed proposal. First, I began, any financial assistance will be a loan, not a gift. 4% interest. Monthly payments of $100 over 5 years. Vanessa frowned. We can barely afford groceries right now. Then budgeting is necessary, I replied, which brings me to the second condition. I continued steadily. Within 90 days, both of you must complete a certified financial literacy program approved by a nonprofit credit counselor. No funds are released until that's done. Mark shifted uncomfortably. That seems excessive. Less excessive than federal prison, I said quietly. Daniel squeezed my hand under the table. Third, I went on, family therapy. Monthly sessions for at least 5 months. Attendance mandatory. My mother's voice rose. We are not dysfunctional. Daniel spoke again. Healthy families don't systematically favor one child for 25 years. The words landed like a slap. Fourth, I said, public acknowledgement. At the next extended family gathering, Mom and Dad will acknowledge the favoritism and apologize for how I was treated. My father looked stunned. You want to humiliate us? I want honesty. Fifth, I continued, any future financial requests must come with written plans. No more emotional emergencies, no more assumptions. Vanessa's eyes filled with tears. You're trying to embarrass me. Yes, I said gently, in the same way I was embarrassed every time my achievements were ignored while yours were celebrated. Mark clenched his jaw. This feels like punishment. This feels like accountability. I took a breath before the final section. Sixth, boundaries moving forward. No automatic bill splitting, no expectations of my availability. Daniel is included in this family fully. Holidays, conversations, respect. My mother stared at the pages like they might burst into flames. And lastly, I said, voice steady, if any of these conditions are violated, the loan becomes immediately due. Silence swallowed the room. My father rubbed his temples. These terms are harsh. They're fair, Vanessa whispered. What if we can't meet them? Then you face the consequences of your choices, I replied, the same way I did for 25 years. My mother finally asked, how long do we have to decide? 24 hours, I said, standing. As Daniel and I walked toward the door, my father called out, Terry, what happens if we say no? I turned back. Then you solve this the way I solve my life, I said, with discipline, accountability, and no one rescuing you. Outside, the night air felt lighter. Daniel covered my hand with his. That was the bravest thing I've ever seen. For the first time, I believed it too. Tomorrow, I'd find out whether my family valued my money more than their pride. Either way, I had already chosen myself. They called the next evening. Not Vanessa, not Mark. My father. His voice sounded older than I remembered, quieter, stripped of the authority he'd always worn like armor. "We'll do it," he said. "All of it." I closed my eyes, not in relief, but in resolve. "Then we do this properly," I replied. The changes didn't happen quickly. They happened uncomfortably. The loan paperwork was signed within the week. Everything documented, everything structured. No emotional shortcuts. The first $1,100 payment cleared my account exactly on schedule the following month. Vanessa and Mark hated the financial literacy course at first. They complained about worksheets, budgeting rules, the humiliation of being taught basics they'd ignored for years. But something strange happened around month 3. They stopped fighting it. For the first time in their marriage, they actually knew where their money was going. They cut up credit cards. They sold designer items. They downsized without drama. Mark found steady work as a construction project coordinator. No commissions, no shortcuts, no lies. He attended anger management classes as required, learned how to sit with stress instead of running from it. The legal situation stabilized. His attorney negotiated a plea deal. No prison. Community service. Restitution. Vanessa went back to nursing full-time. She took a job at a regional clinic earning $42,000, then quietly started a small respite care service for seniors on weekends. $800 a month. Honest money. Their kids transferred to public school. I expected tears, resistance, trauma. Instead, the kids thrived. They laughed more, slept better. Teachers noticed how relaxed they were. Vanessa admitted, reluctantly at first, that public school wasn't the disaster she'd imagined. "I think I was more afraid of what it said about me," she confessed during therapy, "than what it meant for them." Family therapy was the hardest part. My parents squirmed under the spotlight Dr. Karen Lewis held steady. Week after week, the patterns were laid bare. How Vanessa's needs had always been framed as urgent. How mine had been labeled optional. How silence became complicity. My mother cried during one session. "I thought I was helping the child who needed more," she said, voice breaking. "I didn't realize we were teaching Terry that her needs didn't matter." My father admitted something I'd waited decades to hear. "I saw it," he said, "and I stayed quiet. That made me part of the problem." The public acknowledgement happened at Thanksgiving. 15 relatives, one long table. My parents stood up. They apologized, clearly without excuses, for decades of favoritism and how it damaged me. It was awkward, raw, healing. Several aunts and uncles approached me afterward. "We always noticed," one whispered. "We just didn't know how to say anything." Life slowly reshaped itself. Family dinners became normal. My job was discussed. My investments. My plans. When I was promoted to senior software engineer, my parents celebrated the way they always had for Vanessa. Daniel was no longer Terry's boyfriend. He was family. They asked him questions, included him in plans, respected his presence. The biggest change was Vanessa. One night, months later, she said quietly, "I never really knew you. I only knew the version of you who existed to fix my problems." She cried when she said it. "I'm proud of you," she added. "Not because you saved us, but because you didn't." My investment portfolio crossed $420,000 that year. The startup announced its IPO date shortly after. Daniel proposed 3 months later. As promised, my parents contributed $14,000 to our wedding, the exact amount they'd spent on Vanessa's. No fanfare, no favoritism, just equality. At our wedding, my parents walked me down the aisle with genuine pride. Vanessa stood beside me as a bridesmaid. Her kids danced until they dropped. Mark gave a quiet, grateful nod from across the room. During the final therapy session, Dr. Lewis asked us what we'd learned. My mother spoke first. I confused enabling with love. My father followed. I learned that silence can hurt just as much as action. Mark surprised everyone. I learned that I was using support as a crutch instead of building something real. Vanessa's voice shook. I built my identity around being rescued. Now I know I can stand on my own. When it was my turn, I looked around the room, at the people who had hurt me, and then done the work to change. I learned that boundaries aren't cruelty, I said. They're clarity. They don't destroy families. They reveal whether one is willing to grow. 6 weeks later, Daniel and I drove away from our wedding reception, suitcases packed, headed for Italy. 2 months earlier, the company had gone public. My stock options were worth $800,000, but that wasn't the real wealth. The real wealth was knowing I no longer needed to beg for fairness, that respect could be required, that love didn't demand sacrifice of self. For 25 years, I accepted being last because I didn't believe I deserved more. The moment I demanded equality, my family had a choice: honor me or lose me. They chose growth, and that changed everything.